Let's try it out, shall we? Woohoo! Balls and boats. Our form. Howdy, my name's Tony, and welcome to Messing About. Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tony, and this is Messing About. So for today's project, we're going to talk about cockpit lighting. On my previous boat, I do still have it, and I do still paddle it, but I use it for different things now. But on that previous boat, I often found myself out at night. Either that was because I was leaving early in the morning, trying to get out to the fishing grounds. To be honest, not too often, because I'm not much of a morning guy. But more often than that, I found myself out in the evening time. I'd go out for the evening bite, and I'd stay out, and then the sun would go down, and I'd be on the water after dark, having to make my way back. Now, to me, it's not an onerous thing. When you're out at night, it is it's magical. The sun goes down, and the moon comes out, the stars come out. You hear the insects, you hear the fish, you hear the birds, the bats. It's just a really nice time to be out, often by yourself, and really connect with the world around you. It's a great experience, and if you've never done it, I definitely recommend it. Now go prepared. If you're going to be out at night, you need to have you need to be, especially if you're by yourself. Wear your PFD, have a radio, have your lights, have everything that you need to be safe. And that's what today's all about. So when I find myself out at night, I typically have a headlamp, I have a bright flashlight, I have a 360 light on my boat. But I often found myself wishing I had some lights that weren't quite so in your face. If I dropped a lure or a tool in the cockpit, I didn't want to blind myself by shining that bright headlight down looking for things. So on this boat, I've got a plan for the lighting. One piece of it's going to be cockpit lighting, and that's going to be a distributed diffuse light source all through my cockpit and in the aft storage area as well. And then I'll have my 360 light, and that'll all be wired into the boat and controlled, from the boat using the same power source that we use on the motor. So with that said, let's get started. So the first thing I should say is when I decided to start this channel, I was already midstream in this project. So that means I already have the LEDs actually installed, and I'm moving on to the wiring. That's okay, I'll go ahead and walk you through this installation. It's fairly simple. So the first thing we should talk about are the lights themselves. It's not that fancy. I went with green for two reasons. One is human vision is very interesting. You can look it up on Wikipedia. We're most sensitive to green light, which is in the middle of our visual spectrum. The other reason is, hey, it looked really cool with my green boat. And red didn't look very good with it. So I got these off Amazon. I think they were about $15, something like that. And they come in a package of 6. Just enough for the 4 cockpit locations in the front and 2 left for the back. So I put them in this location here specifically because it's really great to light the cockpit and not blind me. So that being said, let's jump into the actual installation process, which is fairly simple. The first thing you need is a template. Now, I like to use Adam's Ready Board, which is the same stuff that Flight Test uses for their RC aircraft. You can use any foam board you want, or you can use cardboard or paper. I do like foam board because it's more structural and it retains marks and holes a little bit better. So cut out a blank that's a little bit larger than this space. Line up the bottom of, I like my blank to be a rectangle so that the sides are parallel. That way I can line up my bottom side with the bottom of the boat and I have a reference. Mark out this opening, cut outside your marks, go back, test fit, and cut until your template can go up against the back of this space and fit perfectly. That's the first step. The next thing is to mark your corners. Normally the best way to do this is to use a straight edge, go from corner to corner, corner to corner, and where they cross in the middle, that's your center. There's other ways to get the center as well. So mark your center. These LEDs come with a foam gasket on the back. Conveniently, that gasket has a hole for the wires and for the screws. So line up that gasket to this center and also to this center on your template, and mark the screw holes using that center hole as a reference to make sure you're lined up in the right spot. So at this point, you should have 3 spots marked on your template. The center hole for the wires, and then the 2 screw holes. Drill out your center hole just big enough for a fine tip Sharpie marker. I'm using the flat Sharpie marker with a fine tip on it. So I'm going with the first stage of this unibit. You use whatever bit you want. I do like unibits specifically for templates because they make a cleaner hole, and that's easier to use when you're marking things. So just line up your template, mark your spots. This is critical because this is what builds your confidence. If you're doing the Wild West thing, I think it's just right about here and drilling a hole in your boat, that can be a little bit scary, but there's no need for that. Using the template allows you to practice without ever touching your boat, really, before you ever drill a hole or make a cut or anything like that. So you know when you do actually mark and drill, it's exactly where it's supposed to be. So mark your spots. Grab your LED, line it up with those spots you just marked. Make sure you're happy with the location of your LED. What I did here is I centered my LED this way and also between the bottom here and then the bottom of this plate. That's just where I wanted it. You can put it where you like. Once you've confirmed your marks are good, it's time to start drilling. Again, a unibit is great for this. These are really soft hulls, and if you're using a traditional drill bit, it can get away with you and wind up scraping and damaging other parts of the hull. These are a lot easier, in my opinion, to control. You do want to kind of be careful how deep you go because there's only a little bit of space here before you hit the outer hull. That's not a big deal. There's enough space for almost 3 of these steps. So I think I went to the 3rd step. And if you're a little bit concerned about that, you can also use one of these fatter unibits so you don't have to go in quite so far to cut your hole. So your middle hole should be just big enough for your pigtail of the wiring plus a marine butt connector, because you're going to need to add wires to the back of the LEDs to get to the back of the boat where you're going to pull everything together. That's pretty simple. I'll show you what that looks like later. Once you've got that middle hole large enough, I think I went with a 3/8 inch hole or something along those lines. The size isn't that critical as long as it's smaller than the outside of this LED. It'll be waterproof. And then for the screws, you're going to use, I would recommend a 3/16 or smaller drill bit because it needs to be smaller than the body of the screw. These are number 6 screws. And you're going to drill out the hole for the screws. The reason you want to pre-drill a hole for the screw is you're making room in the hull for the body of the screw. If you don't do this, if you just screw the hull in directly, you wind up warping the hull. And it's actually a weaker mechanical connection, or at least that's what I believe. So I'm going to pre-drill, and then when you screw it in, then the threads of the screw will bite into the hull and you have a good strong connection. So the last step here is feed your wires in, feed them, just get them in the hull and point them in that direction. And they're fairly simple to reach in through hatch and pull up as needed. Grab yourself some marine goop. Make sure it's marine because it's UV resistant. The plumbers and the shoe goop and all that stuff, they are not. And then put some marine goop on the back side of your gasket around the screw hole and around the wire hole. You don't really have to cover the entire back side of the gasket. In fact, I recommend against it. Two rules of waterproofing. One is keep the water out, and the other is if water does get in, where's it going to go? So what I did was I went around the screw locations, I ran around my wiring locations, and then I did a few dots along the back of the gasket, and then you put in the gasket and the LED light and screw it in. Now the gasket has an adhesive on one side, it'll stick to the LED. So I attached the gasket to the LED before I put the marine goop on there. Just heads up. And then when you screw it in with the screws, everything lines up and it's perfect and you're good to go. At that point, you just leave it be to cure. Then you take that same template that you created, that's an exact fit for this space, and you use that same template in all of the other locations, because at least on this boat, the shape of the locations is all pretty much the same. I did make a small adjustment on the back, where all I did was I wanted the lights to be a little bit farther to the aft, and all I did was I just cut one side of my template a little bit shorter, and then line it up to that opening, but all my holes and everything were exactly the same. And it worked out really good. So at this point, all the LEDs are installed. Let me know if you have questions about anything I said, or maybe I missed a step. I'll be happy to chat. Throw it in the comments. Hey everybody, this is Future Editor Me. So in editing, I discovered this episode was actually running pretty long, so I'm going to split this up into two so I can get this one out to you guys right quick. You can look for the next episode within the next 1 to 2 weeks. And then after that, we're going to try for about a 2 or 3 week episode cadence. I actually have material captured to last into several months from now. And I'm looking, you can look forward to the completion of this lighting project. We're also going to cover the 360 light, how to build it, as well as a 360 light shootout. I've been collecting data for that, looking forward to getting that out to you, and a number of other small projects. So it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.